Hello and welcome back to another Python tutorial. We are gonna continue our discussion of the TD Ameritrade API. Apparently this was a very popular API with people. I was kind of surprised to see that. But in this particular video, we're gonna be talking about how we work with the accounts endpoint and how we work with basically, I'm not gonna execute actual trades, but we're gonna show you how to create a saved trade, how to delete saved trades, how to put new trades up there. The logic is almost identical to actually executing the trade. In fact, the parameters are all exactly the same. The only thing that you would be doing is you just be using that different endpoint. So just keep that in mind. I might not be actually doing the actual execution one, but the information you're seeing with the saved order ones, it's almost identical what you would be passing through. Now, as an FYI to everyone, the documentation on this is just not very good, and I really haven't found a good resource yet that kind of explains everything and what all the parameters are. And so I'll show you where the information is, but just keep in mind that you're going to see a bunch of information and it might not be very clear what it all is. Unfortunately, I don't do enough day trading in my life to understand all these little kind of minute definitions, but I'll kind of show you what at least I think the simple examples are, and then we'll kind of go from there. Now, in our previous videos, we've kind of seen before, uh, you know, we saw how to use the endpoints. We saw how to use Splinter to go get an access token. We have to use an access token for these particular endpoints. Why is that? Because they're related to your account information. They don't want you just, anybody going in there and getting your account information, which makes sense. So you have to make sure you do your authentication process. If you don't know how to do that, I'm not going to explain it in this video. But if you look back at my previous video, I'll put it in the description. I will explain how to basically write this little section of code. All this little section of code is doing is basically opening up a new browser. It's passing through some information, your username and your password related to your TD Ameritrade account, and it's going and getting an access token. And once you have that access token, what it then does is it takes all the information back. It makes the request to go get that access token, and then it parses it. And so I parse it here, and then kind of giving my little sanity check, I have my new access token right here. You can see it's this very, very long number. It's not very exciting, but it's a very important piece of information in order to actually use certain endpoints. So just to keep that in mind. The first endpoint that we're going to be working with is the accounts endpoint. I'll bring up the documentation for that one. It's under API. Oh no, I think I already have that one open. Silly me. So basically, if you go to APIs and you go to accounts and trading, it's down at the bottom. And there's two of them. There's get account and there's get accounts. Now, naturally looking at this, you should be able to tell what it's doing. This one, if you have multiple accounts like I do, so I have an IRA and then a personal trading account, it would return multiple accounts. And then if you want to just get one of those accounts, you use the get account endpoint to get that information. Basically, you have to use this one in order to get the information to use this one, and you'll see in a second. And so from here, it's pretty straightforward. You would just define your endpoint. I'm not going to kind of type all this stuff out. I think naturally, if you saw my other videos, this should all look really familiar. I kind of just want to explain what's really different. So the only thing that's different here is we're now using the accounts endpoint. And of course, I didn't change it. So this one, we're defining the accounts endpoint. And so this is for all of your accounts. We are still making a request, and it's still a get request because we're getting information. We pass through our endpoint, and then we pass through our headers. Now, keep in mind, I defined my headers up here. I basically created a dictionary where the key is authorization, and then the value that's associated with that key is something called bearer with a space in between, and then I'm just passing through my access token. So this in itself is a dictionary, and I'm simply passing that dictionary through my request. That's all. And then when I get my information back, it's going to be of a JSON structure. Well, it's a JSON string, but we need to parse it. So we use the JSON method in order to parse it. And then you'll see in a little bit, I'll kind of show you, but you basically get back all of your accounts. And so There's not really a lot of interesting stuff in here, well, there's actually a lot of good interesting stuff in here, your account balances, things like that, and then things along that information and all that kind of fun stuff. Really what you're concerned about is the account ID. And so to get the account ID, it's pretty straightforward. You just go into your data because it's a list. It's a list. You go into your first account. You go into the securities account key, and then you get the account ID key. That's all. And then that will return back this number. It might differ if so. I came from Scottrade, and so unfortunately, I have a different account number than what's on there. But this one is I guess the TD Ameritrade account ID. I guess that's kind of how they like to think about it. But regardless, you just go into your data set, you get your first account or your second account or basically whatever account you want. You go into the securities account key, so this one, and then you get the account ID from that dictionary because it's a nested dictionary. But again, there's other information in here like, bond value, all that kind of fun stuff. I don't have a lot of money in it. I got my Robinhood for that. Yeah, I use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this out so that way it kind of cleans it up a little bit. So what I did this one for is I wanted to take that account ID because I'm going to use it in my next endpoint. My next endpoint is the account endpoint. So while this one returns all of the accounts that you have under your particular login information, this one will return only the account that you specify. And so the only thing that you're doing is you're just tagging on the account ID at the end. So it's still the same endpoint, but now you're just tagging on this extra piece of information. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm just basically passing along the account ID that I got from this first request, and now I'm passing it through into my second request. Other than that, it's literally exactly the same information. So it's just bringing back that particular information from that account. That's all. So it's just, instead of getting all the information, it's just getting one piece of the information. So those ones are pretty intuitive. I think the next couple ones are going to be the more, I would say, complicated ones. So these are ones that are related to trading. So this is things where you can do things like actually make a trade. You can delete trades. You can create saved orders. That's the endpoint that we're going to be using because I don't want to actually create a trade because I don't have money in my account. So in this one, we're going to be seeing how to use the saved order endpoint, but you're going to notice that these are almost identically related to the actual trading ones. And to kind of just let you guys see it, if I go back to the documentation, this is where I kind of get a little bit frustrated with TD Ameritrade. They don't give you any information on how to use these endpoints. I mean, it was pretty frustrating. To give you an idea, it's broken into a couple categories. There's orders and then there's saved orders. So these are basically the order ones are going to execute, but the saved order ones aren't going to necessarily execute. You're just basically creating an order and you're saving it, but you haven't necessarily executed it yet. But you'll notice that these are pretty much identical to what you're doing up here. So here, if I want to cancel an order, you're going to see that it's almost the same exact information that you would be passing along in your saved orders. And so the first one we're going to work with is the create saved order. So this will create an order that I'm going to save and that I could potentially execute later if I wanted to. Now, they do give us some examples. So if you go to guides, it's the first one up here. It's called place order samples. This is literally all we get. And we don't really get a decent understanding as to what these parameters could be and what their really meaning is behind it. So they give you a couple examples of buy market, buy limit, buy limits, and these are just the different ways you can do it. There's a custom option, conditional orders, so one triggers another. This one kind of, I guess, makes a little sense intuitively. Conditional order, one cancels another. One triggers a, one cancels another. One triggers a, one cancels another, I think. Maybe that's a typo. But basically, they show you what you would have to pass through in your post request. This is kind of where, again, it's not clear. So they give you these examples. You can take these examples and you can actually put them in the actual endpoint. So if I open up any one of these, it will take you where you can play around with it. It just requires your account ID, and it does require that you authenticate yourself. Other than that, though, you just put in all the information that you would normally have. You don't have to if you've authenticated yourself. But then this is where things got very confusing to me. It took me a while to understand that all this is are the possible values that you can send through, and all their possible, well, sorry, all the possible parameters with all their possible values. But there's no discussion as to what these parameters actually mean. You kind of just have to infer by the name of it. And some of them are intuitive, but other ones, for example, are like complex order strategy type. Again, I don't do enough day trading to understand what a butterfly is, or what a back ratio is, or condor or iron condor. They don't really explain that. And I was trying to look on TD Ameritrade's website, and they still don't kind of give a clear uh, discussion on that particular topic. So these are all the potential parameters that you can pass through, along with all their possible values. And then it just gets kind of more confusing because it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And it just sounds like you can keep adding on all these different parameters. So unfortunately, you just kind of have to explore it a little bit. I'm not going to be able to cover it in the videos, but I will show you, at least once you find the information you need to pass along, I'll show you how to post it. So once you've got your information, so what I'm doing is I'm just taking one of their example ones. So this is the one where I think at the top it's I think this is one where it's a buy market, but you can also use it as a saved order. So again, these are exactly the same. We're saving an order, or you're buying an instrument. So even though you can use them in two different endpoints, the parameters are still exactly the same. The only thing that you do have to change is your headers. So up here, I was just passing through my access token, but whenever we're actually passing along information, we have to add an additional parameter or an additional key. That's called content type. The content type key is going to have something that is a value associated with saying, what is the content that we're passing through? Well, in this case, we're passing through a JSON string. Now, in Python, it's a dictionary, but when we pass it through, it's going to be a JSON string. So that's really the only difference, is when we're using our header, we have to add an extra key to it, and it's going to be called content type, and it defines the content that we're passing along. In this case, we're passing along a JSON string. So hopefully that kind of clears things up. This was kind of giving me an error at first because I'm like, why is this not working? Like I know these parameters are correct because I was able to do it on this one, but I wasn't getting anything back when I was doing my Jupyter notebook. Well, if you go, well, you kind of have to make a request, but maybe if I do this, if I delete it, I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to put it here. Okay, and so this is really the kind of the important part. If you send it, go to the C URL, you'll see the header, which is authorization, and then you'll see your bearer component. This was the part I was missing, was content type. So this is specifying the content that we're passing through and the data type of it. It's a JSON string. So don't be afraid to leverage these, and when you're trying to dissect and figure out what's going wrong and which is going right. So once we've done that, once we've defined our headers, again, we're going to change our endpoint a little bit. In this example, we're going to still go to our accounts endpoint. We're still going to pass through the account that we want to have the saved order go to. So again, if you have multiple accounts, you can create a saved order for multiple accounts. And then we're just going to use the save orders endpoint. Keep in mind, it is saved orders. And then we define our payload, which is basically the information that we're going to want to pass along to create our saved order. In this case, I'm defining an order type, calling it market. Session is normal, duration is for the day, order strategy type, which is single, and then I pass through the instruments that I basically want to order. The first one is I want to buy. I'm specifying my quantity, and then I'm going to specify the instruments that I want to buy. In this case, I'm going to buy a share of Pinterest, and I'm defining it as an equity type. So this is probably one of the most simple ones that we can do. And once you've done that, you basically then make your request. Now in this one, we're going to change something. First, Notice up here how I was using get? We're not using get anymore. We're using post. We're posting information. So we're going to call our request module. We're going to call the post method. Then we're going to define the endpoint, which we did right up here. This is just using the saved orders endpoint. We're going to use a new parameter called JSON, and that's going to equal our payload. Notice how this changed that. It's no longer data. It's payload. Oh, sorry, it's not payload. It's JSON. Sorry about that. So because we're passing along a JSON string, we have to pass it under the JSON parameters. Headers is still exactly the same. I'm passing through my header information, and then we make our request. Keep in mind, it's not going to send anything back to us, but we can, if we want, make sure everything's good. And if we get a status code of 200, not 2000, 200, then everything's good to go. That means our order was successfully processed, basically, or at least our saved order. So now that we've done that, maybe we want to see, well, let's grab all of our saved orders, right? I'm going to do another one so that way I have two. And then from here, okay, we have some saved orders. Now we want to go and query it. It's identical. It's literally the same exact thing. However, in this particular one, notice what we changed. With this one, we're no longer passing through any information, so we changed our headers. And more importantly, we changed from a post method to a get method, because now we're going to get the information that we posted. The endpoint is still the same. We haven't changed the endpoint. We just changed the method to get that endpoint. The headers, that changed a little bit, but the parameter that we're passing through is still the same. And then once we get that back, I still print out some stuff, which was the status code. I'll display that just to be safe. So I'll display my status code. And then I got my data, which comes back. I'm going to parse it because it's a JSON string. So here, parse the data sent back to us. I'm going to display that information. So display it. And then I'll explain what this is doing at the next section once I see it. Okay, so we got our status code, 200, all happy. And you can tell we now have two saved orders. They're identical because I simply just called this section of code twice. But this was all the information that we passed through, along with some additional information. So for example, is it cancelable? Yes, it's true. Editable? Yes, it's true. This is important. This is the ID of that saved order. And then we have the saved time, which is the time that we actually made this particular, what is it? Saved order, that one. I couldn't think for a second. But we're going to see that now, if I don't want to get all of my saved orders back, so I might have, some people might have 30 or 40 saved orders. We don't necessarily want every single saved order back. We might want to just get one of those saved orders. Well, if that's the case, I need to get one of these pieces of information, the saved order ID. We're going to take this piece of information, we're going to use it in another endpoint. Now, again, all we have to understand is that what was sent back to us is a list of saved orders. Inside that list are dictionaries, multiple dictionaries basically. So this is one dictionary, and then this is another dictionary. I'm going into my dictionary and I'm getting the saved order key, and I'm returning the value of that. So that should return our saved order ID, which it did. So it's working just like we were expecting. So this is how you query all of the saved orders on your particular account. Don't worry, all this will be up at GitHub. At this point, I just want you to understand kind of the framework behind it, and then hopefully understand and clear up some of the confusion relating to your headers and stuff like that. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Now we're going to talk about querying just a single saved order. How would that look? Well, again, because we're getting some information, we're going to change our headers a little bit. We're no longer going to be passing through any information, so we don't have to define the content type because we're not passing through anything. But in this particular one, we want to access one particular saved order. So our endpoint's pretty much identical. So it's identical up until this point, and you can kind of see that right here. It's pretty much identical up until that point. However, we are now tagging on an extra piece of information. That extra piece of information is the order ID. Well, I got the order ID up here. So I'm just simply taking that information and now passing it along in this particular one. Now, if I do this, everything else is identical. I'm still getting my status code, I'm still taking my JSON information, and I'm still displaying it. Keep in mind, it's not a list anymore, it's just a single dictionary that is sent back to us. So this one is parse the JSON string, and then that displays it, and then grab the order ID. Alrighty. Okay, so this one returns just a single saved order ID. Again, it is not a list, it is just a single JSON dictionary, or sorry, JSON string, but we convert it to a dictionary in Python. And then from here, I'm doing literally the same exact thing, which is I'm just getting that saved order ID. Nothing special at this point. So we've seen how to query our saved orders. We've seen how to pass along our saved orders. So we know how to create one. What's kind of the final thing we can do? Well, we can delete one. We can delete our saved orders. It's going to require that we know the order ID, but once we have that information, guess what? It's literally the same exact thing. We're not adding any content because still we're not passing any content through. However, this does change. It goes from a get method, so it went from a get method to a delete method. So we're deleting it. We're still passing through an endpoint, and we're still passing through our headers. And again, nothing's going to be sent back to us, but we should get the status content 200. To show and prove that to everybody, we now only have one left. So that's deleting your orders once you've quote unquote made them. Definitely comes in handy. Now, kind of just to close things up a little bit, if I go back here to my accounts and training one, so for example, if I get order, you'll notice it's still exactly the same thing. So this is if you wanted to retrieve a single order. Here it is, if I remember correctly, this one is a get, and then get. And then we have a post. So this is where you place your order. Again, I just want to kind of show you. I was able to take this one and use it in the saved order. So all you would change in this example is if you wanted to actually place an order, is it would go, I think this is the one that I have open. Yeah. It would go from saved orders to orders. That's the only change you're going to be making. Is you're just changing the endpoint. Other than that, all the information that we pass through is still the same. And all the possible freaking, I don't even know, like there's just so many parameters that you can define. It's a little bit overwhelming, and I'm very shocked that they haven't documented any of this. Hopefully they come out in the future and they do that, because that would make this thing 10 times easier. But at this point, unfortunately, you kind of just have to explore it. And I'm sure some of you on this channel know more about this than I do. So if you have something that maybe you could share, or you've worked with this firsthand, please put that in the comments. But again, this is just to show you, even if you're not saving an order, you actually want to place one, it's literally the same exact thing. You're just changing your endpoint. This one is you're canceling an order. So again, it's still order ID. It's still a delete method. There's get order by path. So this is the one where we're querying for a particular account ID. This one's, you got a couple optional parameters as well. So you can specify the number of results. You can specify the enter time. If you want to narrow down that particular query, but it's kind of up to you how you want to approach that. And then you've got replace order, which is again pretty much here, which is you can just replace the information, and then it basically what it does is it overrides the existing one. That's all you want to do. And then this one would be a put method at the end of the day. So with that being said, that kind of finishes up the video. I still have one more video I'm going to do with this. I'll probably cover, I think, maybe the additional like replaced order or something like that. But I think at this point, the video is getting kind of long. So if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below and I will try to get back to you. I know some of you are having some difficulties. Hopefully that clears that up. Please let me know if that's clearing that up. If it's not, I'm going to try to kind of keep helping you guys with that a little bit. And then also, if you could, please make sure to like the video. We always appreciate the support. And if you're not already, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so that way you get regular updates. Cool little thing. If you change your YouTube to dark mode, this page looks pretty cool. I didn't realize it would come out like this, but it's got this whole like neon theme going on and everything like that. It's kind of neat. I like it. So there you go. Now you can see all the kind of fancy stuff if you want and see all the vibrant colors. I thought that was neat. I'm sure most people probably don't care, but I thought that was neat. So thanks again for watching, everybody. We will see you in the next video.